When a dying duke collapsed at her doorstep during London's worst storm in decades, Eliza Whitmore, a penniless seamstress mocked by her neighbors as the charity case of Whitechapel, made a choice that would shake the entire kingdom. She could have turned him over to the royal guards hunting him for treason. She could have saved herself. Instead, she hid him in her pantry, lied to armed soldiers, and became the most wanted woman in England overnight. What happened next proved that sometimes the bravest heart beats in the chess society least expects. Stay until the end to see how one door changed two destinies forever. And if you're watching from New York, London, or anywhere in between, drop your city in the comments and smash that like button. The rain came down like judgment itself. Eliza Whitmore pressed her shoulder against the window frame, trying to force the warped wood shut against the gale. Water seeped through the cracks anyway, pooling on the floor of her tiny room above the dress shop. Outside, Whitechapel Lane had transformed into a river of mud and filth, the gutters overflowing, the gas lamps flickering like dying stars. Useless, she muttered, giving up on the window. Everything in this place is useless. Including her, if you asked Mrs. Pemberton downstairs. The shop owner never missed an opportunity to remind Eliza that she lived there on charity, that her stitching barely paid for the candles she burned working late into the night, that a woman of 26 with no family and no prospects should be grateful for scraps. Eliza wrapped her shawl tighter and returned to her work table. 3 dresses lay unfinished, rush orders from ladies who'd pay half what they promised and complain about every seam. Her fingers were raw from the needle, her eyes burning from the poor light, but she couldn't afford to stop. The rent was due in 4 days, and she was still 2 pounds short. The wind howled like something alive, rattling the building's bones. Eliza had lived through bad storms before, but this one felt different, angrier, as if the sky itself had a grudge against London. She was threading her needle when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm, a heavy, irregular thud, then another, like something falling against the door downstairs. Eliza froze, the thread dangling from her fingers. The shop was closed. Mrs. Pemberton had gone to her sister's house across town hours ago, leaving Eliza alone in the building. No one should be at the door, not at this hour, not in this weather. The thudding came again, weaker this time. Then a sound that made her blood go cold, a man's voice, desperate and broken. "Please, someone, please." Eliza set down her needle with trembling hands. Every instinct screamed at her to stay upstairs, to pretend she'd heard nothing. A woman alone, opening her door after dark in Whitechapel? That was how girls disappeared, how bodies ended up in the Thames. But the voice came again, barely audible over the rain. "Help! Me!" Before she could talk herself out of it, Eliza grabbed the fire poker from beside her small stove and made her way downstairs. The shop was pitch black, filled with the ghostly shapes of dress forms and fabric bolts. She navigated by memory, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. At the door she hesitated, her hand hovered over the bolt. "Please," the voice was fading now. "Can't. Hold on." Eliza threw the bolt and yanked the door open. The man fell across the threshold like a corpse, landing face first in a puddle of rainwater and blood. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in what had once been fine clothes, now torn and soaked through. His dark hair was plastered to his skull, and when he lifted his head, his face was a mask of mud and agony. "Help me," he gasped. "They're coming. Hide me, please." Eliza stared at him, frozen. His shirt was torn open, revealing a vicious wound across his ribs, deep enough that she could see bone gleaming white beneath the blood. His hands scrabbled at the doorframe, trying to pull himself inside, but his strength was gone. "Please," he whispered again. "I'm begging you." That was when Eliza heard the horses. The sound cut through the storm like a blade, hoofbeats, dozens of them, coming fast down Whitechapel Lane, and voices, hard and commanding, shouting orders she couldn't quite make out. The man's eyes went wide with terror. "No, no, they found me. Please, you have to hide me. I'll die if they... Get inside." Eliza grabbed him under the arms and hauled with all her strength. He was heavy as lead, dead weight, but fear gave her power she didn't know she possessed. She dragged him over the threshold and kicked the door shut just as the first riders rounded the corner. "Where?" she hissed. "Where can I—" "Anywhere. Anywhere they won't look." The hoofbeats were right outside now. Eliza looked around wildly. The shop was too open, her room upstairs too obvious. There was only one place small enough, dark enough, forgotten enough. The pantry. It was barely a closet tucked beneath the stairs where Mrs. Pemberton stored fabric scraps and broken dress forms. Eliza dragged the man across the floor, leaving a trail of blood and water, and shoved him inside. He collapsed against the back wall with a groan that she quickly muffled with her hand. "Don't make a sound," she whispered fiercely. "Not one sound." She slammed the pantry door and threw an old cutting table in front of it just as someone started pounding on the shop entrance. "Open up! King's Guard! Open this door immediately!" Eliza's hand shook so badly she could barely work the bolt. When she finally got it open, she found herself face to face with 6 mounted soldiers in royal livery, their uniforms soaked, their expressions murderous. The lead soldier, a captain by his insignia, dismounted and pushed past her without asking permission. Water streamed from his coat onto Mrs. Pemberton's good floor. "This establishment is under search by order of the Crown," he announced. "A fugitive is at large in this area, extremely dangerous. Anyone harboring him will be charged with treason and hanged." Eliza's mouth went dry. I don't understand. I'm just a seamstress, sir. I don't know anything about—" "Search every room," the captain barked to his men. "Attic to cellar. Move." The soldiers spread through the shop like locusts. Eliza stood frozen in the doorway, watching them overturn bolts of fabric, kick open cupboards, stab their swords through piles of cloth. Upstairs she heard boots stomping across her floor, drawers being yanked open, her few possessions scattered. One soldier made straight for the pantry. Eliza's heart stopped. He grabbed the cutting table and started to move it aside. Through the crack in the door she could see a sliver of darkness, and a faint gleam that might have been the man's eyes watching. "You there, girl," the captain snapped. "What's in that cupboard?" Eliza forced herself to look confused. "That? Nothing, sir. Just old scraps. Broken things Mrs. Pemberton can't sell. The door doesn't even close properly anymore. The wood's all swollen from the damp." The soldier at the pantry hesitated, looking back at his captain. "Open it anyway," the captain ordered. The soldier reached for the handle. "Wait," Eliza blurted out. Both men turned to stare at her. She scrambled for something, anything to say. "I mean, there are rats in there, sir. Big ones. They've been nesting in the scraps for weeks. Mrs. Pemberton keeps meaning to call someone, but—" She made a disgusted face. "I wouldn't put my hand in there if I were you, not unless you fancy losing a finger." The soldier jerked his hand back instinctively. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Rats," he repeated, his voice flat with suspicion. "Yes, sir. Horrible big ones. I heard them scratching just this morning. If you open that door, they'll scatter everywhere." She gestured at the bolts of expensive silk lining the walls. "Mrs. Pemberton will have my head if they get into the good fabric." For a moment that stretched like eternity, the captain studied her face. Eliza kept her expression earnest, helpless, exactly what he'd expect from a common seamstress too stupid to lie convincingly. Finally, he turned away. "Leave it. If he was here, we'd have found him by now." He raised his voice. "All units, continue down the lane. Search every building within a quarter mile." The soldiers filed out as quickly as they'd come, mounting their horses and disappearing into the storm. Eliza stood in the doorway until the last hoofbeat faded, until she was sure they were truly gone. Then her legs gave out. She collapsed against the doorframe, shaking so violently her teeth chattered. She'd just lied to the King's Guard. She'd hidden a fugitive accused of treason. She could be hanged for this. Hanged. "Are they gone?" The voice from the pantry made her jump. She'd almost forgotten he was there. "Yes," she managed. "They're gone." "Then, could you possibly let me out? I think I'm bleeding on your fabric scraps." Eliza shoved the cutting table aside and yanked the pantry door open. The man half fell into her arms, his face gray as ash, fresh blood seeping through his shirt. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30, with sharp features and eyes the color of storm clouds. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you. You saved my life." "I may have just ended mine," Eliza shot back. "Who are you? What did you do? Why is the King's Guard hunting you?" "I need to sit down. Answer me first." "I will. I swear it. But if I don't sit down in the next 10 seconds, I'm going to pass out and crack my skull open on your floor, and then you'll have hidden me for nothing." Eliza cursed under her breath and helped him to the stairs. He sank down onto the bottom step with a groan that spoke of agony barely held in check. "All right," she said, crossing her arms. "Talk, now, before I change my mind and hand you over myself." The man looked up at her, and despite his wounds, despite his desperate situation, something like a smile ghosted across his face. "My name," he said slowly, "is Adrian Blackwell, Duke of Ravencrest, and I'm being hunted because I discovered a plot to murder the King of England." Eliza stared at him. "You're a duke." "Yes." "And you expect me to believe that a duke is hiding in my pantry, bleeding on my fabric scraps, wanted for treason?" "I know how it sounds." "It sounds insane." "I know." Adrian's voice cracked with frustration. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I planned to end up here begging a stranger to save me?" He pressed a hand to his ribs, wincing. "But it's the truth. The king is being poisoned, slowly, methodically, by someone in his own household. I found evidence. I tried to warn him. And for that, I was branded a traitor and sentenced to death." "Who?" Eliza demanded. "Who would poison the king?" Adrian's expression went dark. "His own son, Crown Prince Edmund. He's been putting arsenic in his father's wine for months, waiting for him to die so he can take the throne. But he's impatient now. He wants it faster. And I was fool enough to discover his plan." The words hung in the air between them, too enormous to fully grasp. Eliza's mind reeled. The prince, the crown prince, poisoning his own father. It was the kind of thing that happened in Gothic novels, not in real life, not in England. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I wish I were." Adrian leaned his head back against the railing, exhausted. "I have proof. Documents. Testimony from the apothecary who supplied the poison. But Edmund moved faster than I expected. He had me arrested before I could get word to Parliament. His men were taking me to the tower when the carriage overturned in the storm." He gestured vaguely at his torn clothes, his wounds. "I ran. I've been running for hours. And when I couldn't run anymore, I knocked on your door." Eliza studied him, trying to find the lie in his face, but all she saw was pain and desperate sincerity. "If what you're saying is true," she said slowly, "then helping you could get me killed." "Yes." "The king could die while you're bleeding in my stairwell." "Yes." "And you have no plan, no way to fix this?" Adrian met her eyes. "No. But I know someone who can help. My cousin, Lord Thomas Ashford. He's a member of Parliament, one of the few men Edmund doesn't control. If I can reach him, if I can get the evidence to him, he can bring this before the Privy Council. He can save the king." "And where is this cousin of yours?" "Northumberland. 3 days' ride, maybe 4 in this weather." "3 days?" Eliza repeated flatly. "You want to ride across England while every soldier in the kingdom is hunting you." "I don't have a choice." "You have the choice to turn yourself in, to tell the truth to who?" Adrian's laugh was bitter. "Edmund controls the guard. He controls half the court. If I surrender, I'll be dead by morning, and the king will die anyway. The only chance is to reach Thomas." He tried to stand and immediately swayed, grabbing the railing to keep from falling. Fresh blood bloomed across his shirt. "You're going to die before you make it 10 miles, Eliza said. "Probably. Definitely. Then I'll die trying." Adrian looked at her, and for the first time his composure cracked. "I know I have no right to ask anything more of you. You've already risked your life for a stranger. But if you could spare me some bandages, maybe some water, I'll be gone within the hour. I won't bring any more danger to your door." Eliza should have said yes, should have given him what he needed and sent him on his way, grateful to be rid of him. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. Instead, she heard herself say, "You won't make it an hour in your condition, let alone 3 days." Adrian's shoulders sagged. "I know. So you need help." "Yes, but someone who knows the back roads, who can pose as your wife so you don't stand out, who can tend your wounds and keep you alive long enough to reach Northumberland." Adrian stared at her, You can't be serious. I'm not, Eliza said. I'm absolutely insane, but I'm also the only chance you've got. Why? The question burst from him like a confession. Why would you do this? You don't know me. You owe me nothing. If you're caught helping me, they'll hang you alongside me. Why would you possibly— Because, Eliza interrupted, and her voice was steady now, certain in a way it rarely was. I'm tired of being the girl who hides, who does what she's told, who's grateful for scraps. She met his eyes. If the king is dying, if the prince is a murderer, if the kingdom needs saving, then maybe, for once in my miserable life, I can do something that matters. Adrian opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're extraordinary, he finally managed. I'm stupid, Eliza corrected. But at least I'll die knowing I tried. She pointed at his wound. Now sit down and let me look at that before you bleed all over Mrs. Pemberton's stairs. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. We don't have much time. The guard will circle back. Then stop arguing and sit. Adrian sat. Eliza retrieved her sewing kit and what clean cloth she could find, along with the bottle of gin Mrs. Pemberton kept hidden behind the counter. She knelt beside Adrian and carefully peeled back his torn shirt. The wound was worse than she'd thought. A sword cut, deep and ragged, running from his ribs to his hip. It had stopped bleeding heavily, but it wasn't closing on its own. Without stitches, it would reopen the moment he moved. This is going to hurt, she warned. It already hurts. It's going to hurt more. She poured gin over the wound without warning. Adrian's back arched, his hand flying up to grip the railing so hard his knuckles went white. But he didn't scream, didn't make a sound except for a hiss of breath through clenched teeth. You're tougher than you look, Eliza muttered, threading her needle. You're more ruthless than you look, Adrian managed. I'm a seamstress. I know how to make things hold together. She set the needle to his skin. This is going to be the worst part. Worse than being stabbed? Much worse. She wasn't lying. Every time the needle pierced his flesh, Adrian's entire body went rigid. Sweat poured down his face. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. But he held still, letting her work, trusting her with a vulnerability that felt strangely intimate. Eliza had sewn hundreds of seams in her life, thousands, but never one like this. Never with human skin instead of fabric. Never with someone's life depending on the tightness of her stitches. Her hands shook at first, but then muscle memory took over. The same careful precision she used on silk and velvet, applied to flesh and blood. There, she said finally, tying off the last stitch. It's not pretty, but it'll hold if you don't do anything stupid. I'm planning to ride across England while wanted for treason, Adrian pointed out. Everything I'm about to do is stupid. Then try to be only moderately stupid. Eliza wrapped clean cloth around his torso, binding it tight. You'll need to change these bandages twice a day, more if they soak through. You're really coming with me, Adrian said. It wasn't a question, but there was wonder in his voice. You're really going to do this. Eliza sat back on her heels, looking at this man, this duke, bleeding in her stairwell, his life in her hands. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been affording rent. Now she was aiding a fugitive, planning to flee the city, plotting against a prince. It was the most terrifying thing she'd ever considered. It was also the most alive she'd ever felt. Yes, she said, I'm really going to do this. Adrian reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, his palm slick with sweat and blood, but the gratitude in his eyes was real. Thank you, he whispered. I'll make sure you don't regret this. I already regret it, Eliza said, but she squeezed his hand back. Now rest for an hour. We leave at first light. First light is in 4 hours. Then you'd better make them count. She helped him up to her room, the only place Mrs. Pemberton would never think to look if she returned early, and settled him on her narrow bed. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow, exhaustion finally claiming him. Eliza stood over him for a moment, studying his face in the candlelight. A duke. She was harboring a duke in her bed. If anyone had told her this morning that this was how her day would end, she would have laughed in their face. But looking at him now, at the pain etched in his features even in sleep, at the vulnerability of his unconscious form, she felt something shift inside her, a door opening onto a path she'd never imagined walking. She turned away and began to pack. She didn't own much: 2 spare dresses, her sewing kit, a few coins saved from months of work. Everything she possessed in the world fit into a single bag. It should have felt pathetic. Instead, it felt like freedom. As the storm raged outside and the city slept, Eliza Whitmore, seamstress, charity case, nobody, prepared to become the most wanted woman in England. And for the first time in her life, she smiled at the prospect. Dawn broke gray and cold over London, the storm finally exhausted. Eliza stood at her window watching the first light creep across the rooftops, her packed bag at her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 4 hours, Mrs. Pemberton would arrive at the shop. In 5, she'd discover Eliza gone. In 6, the questions would start. Behind her, Adrian stirred on the bed, groaning softly as consciousness brought pain rushing back. "We need to leave," Eliza said without turning around. "Now." "What time is it?" "Time to stop being a duke and start being whoever we're pretending to be." Adrian sat up carefully, testing his stitches. The bandages had held through the night, though blood had seeped through in places, dark stains against the white cloth. "We need a story, something simple, something that won't fall apart under questioning." "We're married," Eliza said bluntly. "Thomas and Mary Clark. You're a clerk from Bristol. I'm your wife. We're traveling to visit your sick mother in Yorkshire." "Yorkshire's too far east. If we're heading to Northumberland..." "Nobody knows we're heading to Northumberland except us. We tell everyone Yorkshire, then veer west once we're clear of London." She finally turned to face him. "Unless you have a better idea?" Adrian studied her in the thin morning light. She'd changed into her plainest dress, pulled her hair back into a severe bun, transformed herself from seamstress to common traveler's wife. The change was remarkable. Yesterday she'd seemed small, almost invisible. Today there was steel in her spine. "No," he said quietly. "It's perfect." "Then get up. We have a long walk ahead of us." "Walk? You think we can hire horses? With what money? With half the guard looking for you?" Eliza shouldered her bag. "We walk to the edge of the city, then we find a farmer heading north and beg a ride in his cart, like every other poor couple on the roads." Adrian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. A duke on horseback would draw attention. A clerk and his wife hitching rides would be invisible. They slipped out the back of the shop just as the city was waking. The streets were still slick with rain, the gutters running with refuse. Eliza led them through alleys she'd walked 1,000 times, avoiding the main roads where the guard would be posted. Adrian followed, his hand pressed to his ribs, his face tight with pain he refused to acknowledge. They were 3 blocks from Whitechapel Lane when they heard the commotion behind them. Shouting, horses, the sound of doors being kicked in. "They're searching the street," Adrian breathed. "Edmund must have ordered a house-to-house sweep. Then we run. I can't. You can." Eliza grabbed his arm and hauled him forward. "Because if they catch us, we both hang. Move!" They ran. Adrian's wound screamed with every step, but fear drove him forward. Behind them, the sounds of the search grew louder. Dogs barking, women screaming, the crash of furniture being overturned. Eliza pulled him down another alley, then another, navigating the maze of London's poorest quarter with the sureness of someone who'd grown up invisible in its shadows. They burst onto a broader street just as a farmer's cart rumbled past, loaded with cabbages and heading north. "Wait!" Eliza called out. "Please, sir, wait!" The farmer pulled his horse to a stop, squinting down at them. He was old, weathered, the kind of man who'd spent his whole life working land that barely fed him. "What do you want?" "A ride, sir, please." Eliza put on her most desperate expression, which wasn't hard given the circumstances. "My husband's ill. We're trying to reach his mother in Yorkshire, but we haven't the money for the coach. If you're heading north, even a few miles would be a blessing." The farmer looked at Adrian, taking in his pale face, the way he leaned against Eliza for support. "He don't look well. A fever, sir. Came on sudden last night. I think it's his lungs." "Lungs, eh?" The farmer spat over the side of his cart. "Had that myself once. Nearly killed me." He jerked his thumb at the back. "Get in then. But if he dies on my cabbages, you're cleaning it up." "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much." They climbed into the back of the cart just as the first royal soldiers rounded the corner 3 streets over. Eliza pulled Adrian down among the cabbages, covering them both with her cloak. The cart lurched forward, and London began to fall away behind them. For the first hour, neither of them spoke. They lay hidden among the vegetables, listening to the farmer's off-key humming and the steady clop of his horse's hooves. Every time the cart slowed, every time voices called out from the roadside, Eliza's heart stopped. But the farmer never gave them away. Either he hadn't recognized Adrian, or he didn't care. They were 5 miles from the city when Adrian finally whispered, "Are you all right?" "No," Eliza whispered back. "I just helped a fugitive escape the king's guard. I'm wanted for treason. I'm hiding in a cabbage cart. I am very far from all right." Despite everything, Adrian smiled. "I meant, are you hurt?" "Oh." Eliza glanced at him. "No, you?" "My stitches held, thanks to you. Don't thank me yet. We still have to make it to Northumberland alive." The cart hit a rut, jostling them both. Adrian hissed in pain, his hand flying to his ribs. Eliza saw fresh blood seeping through his shirt. "Your bandages need changing," she said. "We can't stop, not until—" "I know, tonight, when we camp." "Camp," Adrian repeated. "You really have thought of everything. Someone has to." Eliza settled back against the cabbages, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "You titled people wouldn't last a day without us commoners figuring things out for you." She meant it as a joke, but Adrian's expression turned serious. "You're right. I've lived my whole life in comfort. Servants, estates. I've never had to run for my life. Never had to hide in a vegetable cart." He looked at her. "Never had to trust a stranger to save me. I don't know how to do any of this without you." The honesty in his voice caught Eliza off guard. She'd expected arrogance from a duke, entitlement. Instead, she found something that looked like humility. "Well," she said awkwardly, "then it's a good thing I'm here, isn't it?" "Yes," Adrian said softly. "It is." The farmer let them off at a crossroads 10 miles north of London, pointing them toward a coaching inn where they might find another ride. He refused payment, waving them off with gruff kindness. "Take care of that husband of yours," he told Eliza. "Lung fever's no joke." "I will, sir. Thank you." They watched the cart disappear down the road, then turned toward the inn. It was a squat, ugly building surrounded by mud and the smell of horses. The kind of place where travelers asked no questions because they didn't want questions asked in return. "Perfect. Let me do the talking," Eliza said as they approached. "Why?" "Because you talk like a duke, all proper and educated. One word out of your mouth, and everyone will know you're not a clerk from Bristol." Adrian looked offended. "I can talk like a commoner." "Really? Say something common, then." He opened his mouth, paused, then said in his normal aristocratic accent, "I would very much like some ale." Eliza stared at him. "That's not common. That's how a duke asks his butler for a drink." "I said ale instead of wine." "You said very much like instead of want. You enunciated every syllable. You sounded like you were addressing Parliament." She shook her head. "Just don't talk." "Not if anyone asks you questions. Cough if you need an excuse. Let me handle the rest." Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but another wave of pain crossed his face. He nodded reluctantly. Inside, the inn was dark and crowded with travelers waiting out the aftermath of the storm. Eliza found the innkeeper, a hard-eyed woman with flour on her hands, and put on her most desperate smile. "Excuse me, ma'am. My husband and I are trying to reach Yorkshire. Do you know of anyone heading north who might have room for passengers?" The innkeeper looked them over with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every kind of trouble walk through her door. "Yorkshire's a long way. You got money for passage?" "A little, ma'am. Not much, but we can work. My husband's good with horses, and I can cook and clean. Can't pay wages for work I don't need done." The innkeeper turned away. "Try the public coach. Leaves tomorrow morning." "We can't wait until tomorrow," Eliza said quickly. "My husband's mother is dying. We need to get there before—" "Everyone's got a dying mother." The innkeeper's voice was flat. "Roads full of liars with sad stories. Why should I believe yours?" Because it's half true, Eliza thought. Because there is someone dying, the king, and we're the only ones who can save him. But she couldn't say that. So instead, she let tears fill her eyes, not hard, given how terrified she actually was, and said in a breaking voice, "Because I'm begging you, ma'am, please. We've walked all morning. My husband's sick. We have nowhere else to go." For a moment, the innkeeper's expression didn't change. Then something softened in her eyes. Some memory of her own desperation, perhaps, or simple human kindness breaking through years of hard living. "There's a merchant leaving in an hour," she said grudgingly, "heading to Durham with a load of wool. He might take you if you ask nice. Don't tell him I sent you."
"Thank you," Eliza breathed. "Thank you so much."
"Don't thank me. Thank him if he says yes. Now get out of my kitchen before someone thinks you work here." They found the merchant in the stable yard, a portly man arguing with his driver about the state of the roads. Eliza approached carefully, Adrian hanging back and doing his best to look ill. "Excuse me, sir. I heard you might be traveling to Durham?" The merchant turned, irritation plain on his face. "What of it?" "My husband and I are trying to reach his mother in Yorkshire. She's very ill, and Yorkshire's not Durham." "No, sir, but it's on the way. If you could take us even part of the distance, we'd be so grateful. We can pay a little, and we won't be any trouble." "I don't take passengers." The merchant started to turn away. "Please, sir." Eliza moved to block his path, desperation making her bold. "We've been walking since dawn. My husband has a fever. If we don't find shelter soon, he could die on the road. I'm not asking for charity, just mercy." The merchant looked at Adrian, who chose that moment to cough violently, not entirely an act given the pain he was in. Something in the man's expression shifted. "Fine," he said shortly, "but you ride in the back with the wool, and if he vomits on my merchandise, you're paying for it." "Thank you, sir. We won't forget this kindness." Yeah. The merchant waved them toward the wagon. "Get in before I change my mind." They climbed into the back of the wagon and burrowed into the wool bales. It was scratchy and smelled of lanolin, but it was warm, and more importantly, it hid them from view. The wagon lurched forward, and the inn fell away behind them. "That was impressive," Adrian murmured once they were safely out of earshot. "The tears, the desperation. You're a natural liar." "I wasn't lying," Eliza said. "You are sick. We do have nowhere to go. I just left out the part about you being wanted for treason. Still, you saved us back there. Again. Don't sound so surprised. You hired the right person for this job." "I didn't hire you. You volunteered. And you're lucky I did." They fell silent as the wagon rolled north, putting miles between them and London. Eliza watched the countryside pass through gaps in the wool, fields giving way to forest, villages growing smaller and farther apart. With each mile, she felt the weight of the city lifting from her shoulders, the suffocating pressure of Mrs. Pemberton's disapproval, the neighbors' pity, the constant reminder that she was nobody, worth nothing. Out here, she could be anyone. She glanced at Adrian. He'd fallen into an uneasy sleep, his face drawn with pain even in unconsciousness. Without thinking, she reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. His skin was hot, fever hot. Fear spiked through her. The wound was infected. She'd been afraid of that. "Stay alive," she whispered. "Just stay alive long enough to save the king. Then you can die of fever if you insist. But not yet." They traveled all day, stopping only when the merchant needed to rest his horses. Each time Eliza kept watch while Adrian tried to sleep, terrified that soldiers would appear on the road behind them. But the hours passed without incident. Either the guard hadn't yet realized they'd left the city, or they were searching in the wrong direction. Night fell as they approached a small town called Redbridge. The merchant stopped at another inn, this one even rougher than the first. "End of the line for you," he told them. "I'm staying here tonight. You'll have to find your own way from here." "Thank you, sir," Eliza said, "for everything." The merchant grunted and disappeared into the inn without another word. Eliza helped Adrian down from the wagon, alarmed by how much he was leaning on her. "We need to get you inside," she said. "You need rest, real rest." "Can't afford a room." "We'll figure something out." But when she approached the innkeeper, a sour-faced man with yellow teeth, and asked about lodging, he named a price that was 3 times what she had. That's robbery, she protested. That's the rate. Don't like it? Sleep in the stable. The stable was a drafty, freezing shed that smelled of manure and wet hay, but it was shelter, and more importantly, it was private. Eliza settled Adrian in a back corner as far from the door as possible and used their bags as pillows. This is humiliating, Adrian muttered. A duke sleeping in horse manure. You're not a duke tonight. You're Thomas Clark, clerk, and Thomas Clark can't afford better. She pulled off his shirt carefully, checking his bandages. The blood had soaked through completely, and when she peeled the cloth away, she saw what she'd feared. The wound was red and swollen, hot to the touch. Infected. How bad? Adrian asked. Eliza forced herself to sound calm. It needs cleaning, properly this time, and new bandages. We don't have new bandages. Then I'll make some. She pulled out her sewing kit and cut up one of her spare dresses, tearing it into strips. The fabric was clean at least. Better than nothing. She cleaned the wound with the last of the gin, ignoring Adrian's sharp intake of breath. Then she packed it with clean cloth and bound it tight. This should hold until tomorrow, she said. But if the fever gets worse, it won't. Adrian, it won't, he repeated firmly, because I'm not dying in a stable before I save my king. He caught her hand. I promise you, I won't die. Eliza wanted to believe him, but she'd seen infected wounds before. She knew how quickly they could turn deadly. Get some sleep, she said instead. I'll keep watch. You need sleep too. I'll sleep when I'm sure we're safe. But exhaustion betrayed her. She meant to stay awake, meant to keep watch, but within an hour she drifted off. Sitting against the stable wall, Adrian's hand still in hers, she woke to voices outside. Men's voices. Hard and official. Search every building, every stable, every shed. They can't have gone far. The king's guard. Eliza's eyes flew open. Dawn light was streaming through the cracks in the stable walls. They'd slept too long. Adrian, she hissed, shaking him. Adrian, wake up! He came awake instantly, his hand going to his side. What? Guards. Outside. We have to hide. But there was nowhere to hide. The stable was small, bare, with no secret corners or convenient haystacks. Just open space and horses, and the two of them exposed. The voices grew louder. Footsteps approaching. They're going to find us, Adrian breathed. Eliza's mind raced. They couldn't run. Adrian was too weak, and they'd be spotted immediately. They couldn't fight. There were at least 6 soldiers from the sound of it, which left only one option. She grabbed Adrian's face and kissed him. He made a startled sound against her mouth, but she pressed closer, running her hands through his hair, making the kiss look desperate and passionate and completely absorbing. When the stable door crashed open, they were wrapped around each other like young lovers who'd snuck away for privacy. The soldier who found them stopped dead, his face going red. Bloody hell, he muttered. Get a room. Eliza broke away, making a show of fixing her hair and looking mortified. I'm so sorry, sir. We didn't mean... We're married, but we can't afford lodging, and... I don't need your life story. The soldier looked thoroughly uncomfortable now, clearly wishing he'd sent someone else to check the stable. Have you seen anyone suspicious? A man and a woman traveling together might be calling themselves Clark? Eliza felt Adrian tense beside her. She squeezed his hand, a warning to stay quiet. No, sir, she said. We've been here since last night. Haven't seen anyone. The soldier grunted and turned to leave, clearly eager to escape the awkward situation. But then he paused, looking back at Adrian. You. What's your name? Eliza's heart stopped. Adrian opened his mouth, and for one horrible moment, she thought his aristocratic accent was going to give them away. But instead he coughed, a wet, rattling sound that made the soldier step back instinctively. Thomas? Adrian managed in a rough, common voice that sounded nothing like a duke. Thomas Clark, sir. The soldier's eyes narrowed. Clark? That's the name we're looking for. Common name, sir, Eliza jumped in. Half the men in England are named Clark. We're from Bristol, just passing through on our way to see my husband's mother. She's dying of the same lung fever he's got. She gestured at Adrian, who coughed again on cue. We're no one important, just poor folk trying to get home. For an agonizing moment, the soldier studied them both. His hand rested on his sword, and Eliza could see the calculation in his eyes. Could they be the fugitives, the Duke and the Seamstress? But when he looked at Adrian, all he saw was a sick man in filthy clothes, coughing up his lungs in a stable. And when he looked at Eliza, all he saw was a common woman, desperate and frightened, exactly what she'd always been. The invisibility she'd hated her whole life suddenly became their salvation. "All right," the soldier said finally. "Move along soon as you can. The roads aren't safe." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." He left, closing the stable door behind him. They heard him report to his captain outside. "Nothing in here, just some poor couple with the fever." The voices moved away. Hoofbeats receded. Slowly, terribly slowly, the sounds of the search faded into the distance. Eliza and Adrian sat frozen, not daring to move, barely daring to breathe. It wasn't until the inn yard had been silent for a full 10 minutes that Eliza finally let herself relax. "That was too close," she whispered. "The kiss was inspired," Adrian said. His voice was shaking slightly. "How did you think of it so fast?" "Desperate people do desperate things." Eliza stood, brushing hay from her dress. "We need to leave, now, before they circle back." They slipped out of the stable and into the street beyond, just two more travelers among the morning crowds. Behind them, Redbridge woke to another ordinary day, never knowing how close they'd come to witnessing history. As they walked north along the muddy road, Adrian glanced at Eliza. "That kiss meant nothing," Eliza said quickly. "Just part of the act." "Right, of course, the act." "We're pretending to be married. Married people kiss, like—" "Absolutely. Makes perfect sense." They walked in silence for a moment. Then Adrian said very quietly, "It was still inspired." Eliza felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Shut up and keep walking. We've got 2 more days to Northumberland." "2 more days of being married to you," Adrian said. And despite everything, the danger, the pain, the soldiers hunting them, he was smiling. "I can think of worse fates. You're delirious with fever." "Probably. Definitely." But when Eliza glanced at him, she found herself smiling too. The road ahead stretched long and dangerous, filled with soldiers and suspicion and 1,000 ways to die. But for the first time since this mad journey began, Eliza didn't feel quite so alone. And neither, she suspected, did the Duke walking beside her. They didn't make it another mile before Adrian collapsed. One moment he was walking beside her, pale but steady. The next, his knees buckled and he went down hard, hitting the mud with a sound that made Eliza's heart stop. "Adrian!" She dropped to her knees beside him, rolling him onto his back. His eyes were closed, his skin burning with fever. When she pressed her hand to his forehead, it was like touching a stove. "No, no, no, not now, not here." They were on an empty stretch of road with nothing but fields on either side. No shelter, no help, no way to hide if soldiers came. She was utterly alone with a dying man and no idea how to save him. Eliza looked around desperately. A quarter-mile ahead, she could see smoke rising from a chimney. A farmhouse. Maybe. She grabbed Adrian under the arms and started dragging him. He was dead weight, impossibly heavy, but terror gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Her muscles screamed, her back felt like it was breaking, but she kept moving, inch by agonizing inch, toward that distant smoke. It took her 20 minutes to cover the distance. By the time she reached the farmhouse gate, she was sobbing with exhaustion, her dress soaked with mud and sweat. She pounded on the door with her fist. "Please, someone help! My husband's dying!" The door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, flour dusting her apron. She took one look at Adrian's unconscious form, and her expression hardened. "We don't take in strangers," she said, starting to close the door. "Please." Eliza wedged her foot in the gap. "I'm begging you. He has a fever, an infection. If I don't get it down, he'll die. I just need a few hours, some clean water and a place to lay him down. I'll pay you everything I have." "I said no strangers." The woman's voice was firm. "Roads are full of thieves and liars these days. For all I know, you're here to rob me blind. Do I look like I'm here to rob you?" Eliza gestured at herself, filthy, exhausted, half dead with worry. "I'm just trying to save my husband's life. Please, have mercy." Something flickered in the woman's eyes. Not sympathy exactly, but a kind of reluctant recognition, as if she saw something of herself in Eliza's desperation. 5 minutes, she said finally. Get him inside before someone sees. And if this is a trick, I've got a shotgun and I know how to use it. It's not a trick. Thank you. Thank you so much. Together they hauled Adrian into the farmhouse and laid him on a rough wooden table. Eliza immediately went to work peeling off his blood-soaked bandages while the woman fetched water and clean cloth. What happened to him? The woman asked, eyeing the wound with professional assessment. Accident? Eliza said quickly. He fell on a piece of broken fence, cut himself badly. That's a sword wound. Eliza's hands froze. She looked up slowly and found the woman watching her with knowing eyes. My husband fought in the wars, the woman continued. I know what a blade does to flesh. That's no accident. She crossed her arms. So I'll ask you again. What happened to him? Eliza's mind raced. She could lie. Should lie. But something in this woman's face, the hardness born of loss, the suspicion earned by experience, told her that lies wouldn't work here. He was attacked, she said carefully, by men who wanted him dead. We've been running ever since. What did he do? Steal something? Cheat someone? He told the truth, and powerful people didn't want to hear it. The woman studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she nodded. I knew a man like that once. Good man, honest man. Got him killed. She moved to the fire and set a pot of water to boil. You can stay until nightfall. After that, you're on your own. I won't risk my neck for strangers, truth-tellers, or not. Nightfall is all I need. Thank you. While the water heated, Eliza cleaned Adrian's wound properly for the first time since leaving London. The infection had spread, angry red lines radiating from the original cut. She packed it with the hottest water she dared use, then wrapped it in clean bandages the woman provided. He needs medicine, the woman said, watching her work. Willow bark for the fever, comfrey for the infection. I've got both in my garden. I can't pay you. Didn't ask for payment. Wait here. She returned with an armful of herbs and showed Eliza how to brew them into a poultice and a tea. They worked in silence, two women who understood that survival sometimes meant helping strangers, even when it was dangerous. When the medicine was ready, Eliza spooned it between Adrian's lips, praying he'd swallow. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then his throat worked, and he swallowed reflexively. Good, the woman said. Now we wait. The afternoon crawled by. Eliza sat beside Adrian, replacing the poultice every hour, forcing more medicine down his throat whenever he stirred. The woman went about her chores, occasionally glancing their way but saying nothing. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Adrian's eyes finally opened. Eliza? His voice was a croak, barely audible. I'm here. Relief flooded through her so powerfully she had to blink back tears. Don't try to move. You've been unconscious for hours. Where? A farmhouse. We're safe. For now. Adrian tried to sit up and immediately groaned, falling back. The soldiers haven't found us yet. Eliza pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. But we can't stay. The woman who owns this house is letting us leave at nightfall. After that, we're on our own again. How far to Northumberland? A day and a half, maybe 2, at the rate we're going. I'll be faster, I promise. You'll be dead if you push too hard. Eliza's voice was sharper than she intended. That fever almost killed you. You need rest, real rest. Not a few hours in a stable or a farmhouse kitchen. We don't have time for rest. Every hour we waste is another hour the king is being poisoned. And every hour you waste dying is an hour closer to both of you being in the grave, Eliza snapped. You think I dragged you this far just to watch you kill yourself? Adrian stared at her, startled by the vehemence in her voice. Then slowly, something like understanding dawned in his eyes. You're afraid, he said softly. Of course I'm afraid. I'm terrified. I'm wanted for treason. I'm running across England with a dying duke. Soldiers are hunting us, and our only plan is to reach your cousin and hope he believes us before we're both hanged. The words burst out of her like a dam breaking. So yes, Adrian, I'm afraid, and if you die on me now, I'll have risked everything for nothing. She turned away before he could see the tears in her eyes. Behind her, she heard him shift on the table, heard the strain in his voice as he spoke. "I won't die," he said. "I swore that to you. I meant it. You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise to try." He reached out and caught her hand. "And I can promise that if we survive this, when we survive this, I'll make sure you never regret the choice you made in that doorway." Eliza looked at their joined hands. His grip was weak, his skin still too hot, but there was determination in his touch, the same determination that had kept him running even when his wound should have killed him. "You're a stubborn man," she said. "I'm a duke. Stubbornness is hereditary." That explains a lot. Despite everything, they both smiled. It was a fragile moment of lightness in the darkness that surrounded them, but Eliza held on to it like a lifeline. When night fell, the woman gave them bread and cheese for the road and directions to a coaching inn 15 miles north. "My cousin runs it," she said. "Tell him Margaret sent you. He'll give you a room, no questions asked. But after that, you're on your own." "You've done more than enough," Eliza said. "Thank you." Margaret studied her with something that might have been respect. "You're tougher than you look. Most women would have given up by now." "Most women haven't had to fight for every scrap their whole lives." Eliza shouldered her bag. "You learn to be tough, or you learn to die. I chose tough." "Good choice." Margaret opened the door. "Now get gone before I change my mind about helping you." They slipped into the night, Adrian leaning heavily on Eliza, but walking on his own power. The medicine had brought his fever down, though he was still weak as a kitten. Every mile was a struggle, but he kept moving, driven by the knowledge that time was running out. They reached the coaching inn just before midnight. Margaret's cousin, a taciturn man named Samuel, gave them a room without comment and disappeared back downstairs. The room was small and bare, but it had a real bed and a door that locked. Eliza helped Adrian onto the bed and immediately set about changing his bandages again. The wound looked better, still infected, but not spreading. The medicine was working. "You should sleep," she told him. "We leave at dawn." "What about you?" "I'll keep watch." "Eliza." "Don't argue, just sleep." He wanted to protest. She could see it in his eyes, but exhaustion won, and within minutes, he was unconscious. Eliza sat by the window, watching the road outside for any sign of soldiers. The night was quiet, except for the sound of Adrian's breathing and the occasional creak of the building settling. She should have been exhausted, should have fallen asleep the moment she sat down. But her mind wouldn't rest. It kept circling back to the same question. What happened when they reached Northumberland? When they found Adrian's cousin and delivered the evidence? Would it be enough? Would Parliament believe them, or would the prince's power prove too great to challenge? And what happened to her after? She couldn't go back to London, couldn't return to her old life. That door had closed the moment she'd opened another one to a dying stranger. So what did that leave? A life on the run? A hangman's noose? Or something else entirely? She glanced at Adrian, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days. In the dim light, he looked younger, vulnerable. Nothing like the powerful duke he'd been before his world collapsed. They were both fugitives now, both running from the same enemy, both fighting for the same cause, both alone in the world except for each other. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost like relief. Dawn came too quickly. Eliza woke Adrian and they set out again, hitching a ride with a wool merchant heading toward Durham. The merchant was suspicious and unfriendly, but his wagon was going the right direction, and that was all that mattered. They were 2 hours into the journey when they saw the checkpoint. A dozen soldiers had blocked the road, stopping every wagon and cart, searching every passenger. Eliza felt her blood turn to ice. "They're looking for us," she whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened. "We can't turn back. They'll spot us. We can't go forward. They'll search the wagon." "Then what?" "I don't know." The merchant was slowing down, approaching the checkpoint. In seconds, they'd be discovered. Eliza looked around frantically for an escape route, but there was nothing, just open fields and soldiers everywhere. They were trapped. Then Adrian did something that stopped Eliza's heart. He stood up in the back of the wagon, fully visible to everyone, and called out in his aristocratic duke's voice, "Captain, a word, if you please." Every soldier turned to stare. The merchant jerked his horse to a stop, looking back in confusion. And Eliza wanted to scream, "What are you doing?" But Adrian was climbing down from the wagon, walking straight toward the checkpoint captain with the confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything in his life. "My good man," he said, his accent now pure nobility, unmistakable and undeniable. "I wonder if you might assist me. I'm searching for two fugitives, a duke and a seamstress, traveling together. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" The captain's eyes narrowed. "Who's asking?" "Lord William Ashford," Adrian said smoothly. "Cousin to the Duke of Ravencrest. I've been dispatched by the Crown Prince himself to aid in the search. The fugitives may be headed north. I need to know if they've passed through this checkpoint." Eliza's mind reeled. Lord William Ashford. Thomas Ashford was Adrian's cousin, the one they were riding to meet. But who was William? The captain studied Adrian's bearing, his accent, the aristocratic authority in every line of his body. Then, incredibly, he saluted. "No one matching that description has passed through here, my lord. We've been stopping every wagon since dawn." "Excellent. Keep up the good work, Captain." Adrian turned as if to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Captain, the woman with me is my wife. We're traveling north on personal business. I trust you won't delay us?" The captain glanced at Eliza, still sitting frozen in the wagon. "Of course not, my lord. Safe travels." Adrian climbed back into the wagon, and the merchant, now thoroughly confused but not about to question a lord, urged his horse forward. They passed through the checkpoint without another word. It wasn't until they were a mile down the road that Eliza found her voice. "What," she hissed, "was that?" "That was me being a duke," Adrian said. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead from the effort of standing, but there was satisfaction in his eyes. Sometimes the best disguise is no disguise at all. "You could have gotten us killed." They were going to search the wagon anyway. This way we passed through without suspicion. "By claiming to be your own cousin? What if someone asks for proof? What if someone actually knows William Ashford? William died 3 years ago. Only family knows. And the soldiers at a random checkpoint certainly don't." Adrian leaned back against the wool bales, breathing hard. The trick to lying convincingly is to stay as close to the truth as possible. "I am Adrian Blackwell. I am a duke. I am searching for fugitives, specifically the people the Crown Prince thinks we are." Everything I said was technically true. Except the part where you're working for the prince who wants you dead. A minor detail. You're insane. I'm alive. Adrian met her eyes. We both are. And that's what matters. Eliza wanted to argue, but she couldn't. As reckless as it had been, Adrian's gamble had worked. They'd passed through a checkpoint that should have meant their capture. "Don't ever do that again," she said finally. "I'll try not to, but I can't promise." Stubborn. Hereditary, remember? They traveled through the afternoon without further incident. The merchant let them off at a crossroads near the border of Northumberland, and they walked the final miles on foot as the sun set behind them. Adrian's estate, or rather, his cousin Thomas's estate, came into view as twilight fell. It was a massive stone manor house surrounded by manicured gardens and high walls. The kind of place where dukes and lords lived, far removed from the world of common people. Eliza felt suddenly, painfully aware of her muddy dress, her tangled hair, the fact that she was about to walk into a nobleman's home looking like something dragged backward through a hedge. "I can't go in there," she said, stopping at the gate. Adrian turned. "What? Why not?" "Look at me. I'm filthy. I'm nobody. Your cousin is going to take one look at me and call the guards." "He's going to take one look at me and call the guards. You're the respectable one here." Adrian caught her hand. "Eliza, I need you with me. You got me this far. Don't abandon me now." "I'm not abandoning you. I don't belong in a place like this." "Neither do I. Not anymore." His grip tightened. "We're in this together. Remember?" Eliza looked at the manor, then at Adrian, then down at their joined hands. She thought about the door she'd opened 4 days ago, the choice she'd made, the path she'd chosen. There was no going back now. "Together," she said quietly. They walked up to the main entrance, and Adrian knocked with authority. A butler answered, took one look at them, and started to close the door. "Tell Lord Ashford," Adrian said quickly, "that his cousin Adrian is here, and that it's urgent." The butler hesitated. "Lord Ashford is at dinner and not to be disturbed. Tell him it's about the king's life. He'll want to hear it." Something in Adrian's voice made the butler pause. He studied Adrian's face, searching for something. Whatever he saw made him nod slowly. Wait here. 5 minutes later, the door opened again to reveal a man in his 40s, tall and distinguished, with the same sharp features as Adrian. His eyes went wide with shock. Adrian? We thought you were... Everyone thinks you're... dead? Arrested? Both? Adrian swayed slightly and Eliza caught his arm. Can we come in, Thomas? We have a story to tell you, and not much time to tell it. Thomas Ashford looked from Adrian to Eliza, taking in their battered appearance, the desperation in their eyes. Then he stepped back and opened the door wide. Come in, quickly, before anyone sees. They followed him into a private study, where a fire burned cheerfully and bookshelves lined the walls. Thomas dismissed the servants and locked the door behind them. Start talking, he said. And don't leave anything out. So Adrian told him everything. The discovery of the poison plot, the prince's betrayal, the arrest and escape, their flight across England. And as he spoke, Eliza watched Thomas's expression shift from disbelief to horror to cold, burning anger. Edmund, Thomas breathed when Adrian finished. Edmund is poisoning his own father. I have proof. Adrian pulled a folded packet of documents from inside his shirt. The apothecary's records, purchase orders, letters in Edmund's own hand, everything you need to bring this before Parliament. Thomas took the documents with shaking hands and read through them. His face went white. This is treason of the highest order. If this is true, it is true. I swear it on my life. Then the king could die at any moment. We need to act immediately. Thomas moved to his desk and began writing rapidly. I'll send word to the Privy Council tonight. Demand an emergency session. We can have Edmund arrested by... No. Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. Edmund controls too many people. If you move through normal channels, he'll hear about it. He'll have time to destroy evidence, to discredit us, to kill the king before we can stop him. Then what do you suggest? We go to the king directly, tonight. We show him the proof ourselves and let him decide what to do with his son. Thomas stared at him. You want to request a royal audience? Now? Looking like that? I want to save the king's life before it's too late. Adrian, even if I could arrange it, even if the king agreed to see you, you're a wanted fugitive. The moment you set foot in the palace, you'll be arrested. Then you'll have to make sure I'm not arrested. How? You're a member of Parliament. You have influence. Use it. Adrian leaned forward, intensity burning in his feverish eyes. Thomas, the king is dying. Edmund is days away from the throne. If we don't act now, England falls into the hands of a murderer. I need you to help me, please. The two cousins stared at each other across the desk. Then Thomas took a deep breath and nodded. All right, I'll send word to the palace. Request a private audience with the king on urgent state business. If he agrees, I can smuggle you in as part of my retinue. He looked at Eliza. But she comes with me, Adrian said firmly. She saved my life. She's earned the right to see this through. She's a commoner. She can't be presented at court. She can be presented as my betrothed. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. Thomas's mouth fell open, and Eliza felt the world tilt sideways. You're what? She managed. Adrian didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Thomas. My betrothed. My future duchess. That's the story we'll tell. That's how she gains entry to the palace. Adrian, that's impossible. You can't just claim to be engaged to a seamstress. Why not? I'm already a fugitive accused of treason. Adding a scandalous engagement to the list seems minor by comparison. Now Adrian did turn to Eliza, and his expression was unreadable. Unless you object? Eliza's mind was spinning. Betrothed. Duchess. The words didn't even seem real. I'm nobody, she whispered. I'm a seamstress from Whitechapel. I can't be a duchess. You dragged me through London while wounded. You lied to soldiers. You saved my life 6 times. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Adrian's voice was soft but fierce. If that doesn't qualify you to be a duchess, then the title means nothing. Thomas was shaking his head. The court will never accept it. The scandal alone, I don't care about scandal. I care about stopping Edmund. Adrian's hand found Eliza's. And I care about making sure the woman who risked everything for me doesn't end up on a scaffold because I couldn't protect her. Is that what this is? Eliza asked quietly. Protection? It's whatever you want it to be. Adrian met her eyes. But it's also the truth. You've become... He paused, searching for words. You've become important to me, more important than I expected. And I won't leave you behind now, not when we're this close. Eliza looked at their joined hands. 4 days ago, she'd been a nobody, a charity case. Now she was standing in a lord's study, being asked to play a duchess, to walk into a palace, to help save a king. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly what she'd wanted her whole life without knowing it. All right, she said. I'll do it. Thomas threw up his hands. You're both mad. Probably, Adrian agreed, but we're also right. Send word to the palace, Thomas. Tonight. We're running out of time. Thomas looked at them both. At his cousin, the fugitive duke, at the seamstress playing at nobility, and sighed heavily. Fine. But if this goes wrong, if Edmund has you both arrested and executed, I'm not attending the funeral. Fair enough. Thomas left to send his message, and Eliza and Adrian were alone. The fire crackled softly. Outside, night had fallen completely. A duchess, Eliza said, still trying to wrap her mind around it. A pretend duchess, Adrian clarified. Just for the palace. Just to get you through the doors. Right. Pretend. Unless... Adrian stopped. Unless what? He turned to face her fully. In the firelight, his expression was open in a way she'd never seen before. Vulnerable. Unless you wanted it to be real, he said quietly. After this is over. After we've saved the king and cleared my name and stopped Edmund. We could... He trailed off, then started again. What I'm trying to say very badly is that these past few days with you have been the most terrifying and the most extraordinary of my life. And I've realized that I don't want them to end. I don't want to go back to being a duke in a big empty house. I want... Adrian. Eliza stopped him with a hand on his chest. Ask me after, when we're not running for our lives. When we know we'll survive the night. Ask me then. He covered her hand with his. And if I don't survive the night, then I'll make sure your last act was saving the king. That's all that matters. No, Adrian said fiercely. It's not. You matter. Your life matters. Your future matters. And I swear to you, Eliza, I will make sure you have one. Before she could respond, Thomas returned. The king has agreed to see us, he said. Tomorrow morning. Private audience. Just the three of us. He looked grim. But Edmund will be there too. The king insists his son be present for any accusations brought against the crown. Eliza felt her stomach drop. Then it's a trap. Maybe. Or maybe it's the king testing us. Either way, we have one chance to present our evidence and convince him before Edmund silences us forever. Then we'd better make it count, Adrian said. That night, they prepared for the audience with the focus of soldiers before battle. Thomas provided them with proper clothes. A suit for Adrian, a gown for Eliza that made her look like someone who belonged in a palace. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. You look like a duchess, Adrian said from behind her. I look like an imposter. We're all imposters in our way. The trick is believing the part you're playing. He straightened his collar. Tomorrow, you're not a seamstress. You're Lady Eliza Whitmore, my betrothed. You're brave and brilliant, and you belong in that room as much as any of them. Believe it. And if I can't, then fake it. That's what I've been doing for years. She turned to look at him. You? But you're a duke. You were born to this. I was born to privilege, not to courage. That I had to learn. He smiled slightly, mostly from you, these past few days. Before Eliza could respond, Thomas entered. The carriage is ready. We leave for London within the hour. He looked at them both. Last chance to back out. Once we're in that palace, there's no escape if things go wrong. Things went wrong the moment I discovered Edmund's plot, Adrian said. Now we finish it. They climbed into the carriage as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The journey to London took all day. And with every mile, Eliza felt the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on her. They were going to accuse a crown prince of murder in front of the king, with the prince himself in the room. It was, without question, the most dangerous thing she'd ever attempted. But when she looked at Adrian sitting across from her in the carriage, she saw the same determination she felt, the same refusal to back down. They'd come too far to stop now. The palace loomed before them as evening fell, massive and imposing, all white stone and golden windows. Thomas's influence got them through the gates, and they were led through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past guards who watched them with suspicious eyes. Finally, they reached a private chamber. A servant announced them. Lord Thomas Ashford, Duke Adrian Blackwell of Ravencrest, and Lady Eliza Whitmore. The door opened and they stepped inside. The king sat in a high-backed chair, looking older and frailer than his portraits suggested. His skin had a grayish pallor that confirmed everything Adrian had said about the poison. Beside him stood Crown Prince Edmund, tall, handsome, his expression one of polite surprise. "Cousin Adrian," Edmund said smoothly, "how unexpected. We thought you dead." "Clearly you were mistaken," Adrian replied. The king's eyes were sharp despite his illness. "You requested this audience, Lord Ashford. Explain why I should not have this fugitive arrested immediately." Thomas stepped forward. "Your Majesty, my cousin has evidence of a plot against your life. Evidence we believe you must see before any arrest is made." "Evidence?" Edmund's voice dripped with false concern. "Father, this man is delusional. He's been spreading wild conspiracy theories for months. That's why I had him arrested, for his own protection and yours." "Then you won't mind if we present our proof," Adrian said. He pulled out the documents and laid them on the table before the king. Purchase orders, letters, the apothecary's confession, all of it pointing to one conclusion. The king read in silence. With each page, his face grew paler, his hands began to shake. His voice was barely a whisper. "This is impossible." "Father, he's clearly forged these documents," Edmund said quickly. "He's trying to frame me out of jealousy, out of—" "Silence." The king's voice cracked like a whip. He looked at his son with eyes full of betrayal and dawning horror. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been poisoning me." Edmund's mask finally slipped. For just a moment, Eliza saw the truth beneath: cold calculation, ruthless ambition, and not an ounce of remorse. "Everything I've done," Edmund said quietly, "has been for England. You're weak, father, dying. The kingdom needs a strong ruler. I'm simply hastening the inevitable." The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. Then everything happened at once. The king shouted for guards. Edmund drew a hidden blade. Adrian lunged forward to protect the king, and Eliza acted on pure instinct. She grabbed a heavy candlestick from the table and swung it with all her strength, catching Edmund across the temple. The prince went down like a felled tree, unconscious before he hit the floor. Guards burst into the room, weapons drawn. For a moment, chaos reigned. Then the king's voice rose above it all. "Arrest him! Arrest the prince! He confessed! You all heard him confess!" The guards hesitated, confused. A crown prince, arrested for treason? "Do it!" the king roared with more strength than Eliza had thought him capable of. "Now!" They obeyed. Edmund was hauled to his feet, still dazed from the blow, and dragged from the room in chains. The king sagged back in his chair, looking 10 years older. "You saved my life," he said to Adrian. "Both of you. You risked everything to save me." "It was the right thing to do, Your Majesty," Adrian said. The king's eyes moved to Eliza. "And you, girl, you struck a prince of England." Eliza's blood ran cold. In her desperation to protect Adrian and the king, she'd forgotten that small detail. Striking royalty was a crime punishable by death. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," she whispered. "I didn't think. You saved my life as surely as the Duke did." The king smiled, a weak, tired smile, but genuine. "For that you have my eternal gratitude, both of you. Anything you want, any reward, name it, and it's yours." Adrian didn't hesitate. "Permission to marry Lady Eliza, Your Majesty, with your blessing." The king's eyebrows rose. He looked at Eliza, really looked at her. taking in her common dress beneath the borrowed gown, her work-roughened hands, everything that marked her as someone who didn't belong in this world. "She's a commoner," he said. "She's extraordinary," Adrian countered. "She saved my life. She saved yours. She's braver than half the nobles in your court. And I love her." The words dropped into the silence. Eliza's breath caught. Love. He'd said love. The king studied them both for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled again. "You have my blessing," he said. "Marry her, Duke Blackwell, and may you be as happy as you deserve." Adrian turned to Eliza, his eyes shining. "Well, what do you say? Will you actually be my duchess? For real this time?" Eliza looked at him, this man who'd collapsed at her doorstep 4 days ago, who'd trusted her with his life, who'd just declared his love in front of a king. She thought about the door she'd opened, the choice she'd made, the path that had led her here. And she knew, with absolute certainty, what her answer would be. But before she could speak, the chamber doors burst open again. A messenger stumbled in, his face white with panic. "Your Majesty, the prince's men, they've seized the palace gates. They're demanding Edmund's release. They say if you don't free him within the hour, they'll storm the palace and take him by force." The king's face went gray. "How many?" 200 armed soldiers, Your Majesty, maybe more." Adrian's hand found Eliza's. "It's not over," he said quietly. And outside, the sound of marching feet and shouted orders began to echo through the palace halls. The sound of boots on marble grew louder, closer, like thunder rolling toward them. Eliza felt Adrian's hand tighten around hers as the messenger stumbled backward, his face slick with sweat. "Your Majesty, they're demanding an answer. Prince Edmund's captain says if you don't release him, they'll consider it an act of war against the rightful heir." The king's guards shifted nervously, their loyalty suddenly uncertain. After all, Edmund had been their future king just moments ago. Who were they supposed to serve now? "How dare they threaten their sovereign?" Thomas stepped forward, his voice ringing with authority. "This is treason. The prince confessed to poisoning the king in front of witnesses. Any man who supports him now is guilty of the same crime." "But there are 200 of them, my lord," one of the guards said quietly, "and only 40 of us in the palace tonight. If they storm the gates, then we'll all die," the king finished, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. He looked at Adrian. "You've saved my life once today, Duke Blackwell. I won't ask you to throw it away defending me now. Take your lady and go. There's a servant's passage that leads to the river. You can escape while there's still time." "With respect, Your Majesty," Adrian said, "we didn't come this far just to run at the first sign of danger. There are 200 armed soldiers outside, and there are loyal men inside who'll fight for their rightful king once they understand what's at stake." Adrian turned to the guards. "The prince admitted to murder, to poisoning his own father. Do you want to serve a man like that? Do you want England ruled by a murderer who'd kill his own blood for power?" The guards exchanged uncertain glances. One of them, older than the rest, with gray in his beard, spoke up. "We heard the confession, Your Grace, but the prince's men. But as they're saying you forced it, that you tortured him, threatened him. We showed the king evidence," Eliza said suddenly. Every eye in the room turned to her. "Documents. Proof. The prince confessed because he couldn't deny what was written in his own hand." "Who are you to speak here?" another guard demanded. "She's the woman who saved your king's life tonight," Adrian said sharply. "She's worth 10 of Edmund's hired thugs, and if you had any sense, you'd listen to her." The old guard studied Eliza with new interest. "You struck the prince, they're saying, knocked him cold with a candlestick." "I did what needed doing," Eliza said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "Same as I've been doing for days, same as I'll keep doing until this is finished." Something shifted in the guard's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of someone who understood survival. "What would you have us do?" he asked the king. "We're outnumbered 5-1. Even if we wanted to fight—" "We don't fight them," Eliza interrupted. Everyone stared at her again. "We make them fight each other." "What are you talking about?" Thomas demanded. Eliza's mind was racing, piecing together fragments of conversation she'd overheard in the past few minutes. The prince's men are soldiers, right? King's guard who've been loyal to Edmund. But how many of them know the truth about what he did? How many actually heard him confess to murder? None, Adrian said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Only the people in this room heard it. Exactly. So right now, Edmund's captain is telling his men that we've arrested the prince on false charges, that we're the traitors. Eliza turned to the king. But what if we tell them the truth? What if we show them the evidence? How many do you think will still want to fight for a man who'd poison his own father? The king leaned forward, new energy in his voice. You think we can turn them? I think soldiers follow orders because they believe in the cause. Take away the cause, and the orders don't mean much anymore. Eliza looked at the guards. How many of you have families, children? Do you want to die for a prince who confessed to murder? Or do you want to serve a king who actually deserves your loyalty? The old guard was nodding slowly. She's right, Your Majesty. Half those men out there are good soldiers. They're following Edmund because they think they're protecting the rightful heir. If they knew the truth, they'd lay down their weapons, the king finished. He stood, wincing at the effort, but his voice was strong. Open the gates. I'll speak to them myself. Your Majesty, you can't, Thomas protested. You're in no condition. I'm in no condition to hide while my kingdom tears itself apart. The king straightened his shoulders. I'm still the king of England, and I will address my subjects. Adrian nodded. Then we'll stand with you. All of us. They made their way through the palace corridors, the king leaning heavily on Thomas's arm, guards forming a protective circle around them. Eliza walked beside Adrian, acutely aware of the curious stares from servants and courtiers who'd emerged from their hiding places to watch the spectacle. You're doing it again, Adrian murmured. Doing what? Being extraordinary, coming up with plans that might actually work, or might get us all killed. There's that possibility, yes. Despite the fear coursing through her veins, Eliza almost smiled. And you're still joking about it. What else can I do? We're about to walk out in front of 200 armed men and hope they don't immediately shoot us. Humor is all I have left. They reached the main gates. Through the iron bars, Eliza could see Edmund's forces assembled in the courtyard, row upon row of soldiers in royal livery, weapons drawn, faces hard with determination. At their head stood a captain in gilded armor, his hand resting on his sword hilt. Open the gates, the king commanded. The guards hesitated. Your Majesty, open them. That's an order. The gate swung wide with a groan of metal. The king stepped through, and immediately a dozen crossbows swung to aim at his chest. Adrian moved to shield him, but the king waved him back. Hold your fire, the captain of Edmund's forces commanded. He stepped forward, his expression a mixture of anger and confusion. Your Majesty, we demand you release Prince Edmund immediately. He is the rightful heir. Whatever crimes you believe he's committed, he confessed, the king said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. In front of witnesses, he admitted to poisoning me, to slowly murdering his own father so he could take the throne. A murmur ran through the assembled soldiers. The captain's jaw tightened. That's a lie. The Duke forced him. I forced nothing. Adrian stepped forward. I presented evidence. The prince's own documents, his own letters, his own orders to the apothecary who supplied the poison. When confronted with proof of his crime, he confessed. He said, and I quote, "Everything I've done has been for England. You're weak, Father. I'm simply hastening the inevitable." The murmur grew louder. Soldiers were looking at each other now, uncertainty creeping into their faces. You expect us to believe a fugitive's word? The captain demanded. No, the king said. I expect you to see the evidence with your own eyes. He nodded to Thomas, who held up the document so the nearest soldiers could see. Purchase orders for arsenic and wolfsbane signed with the prince's seal. Letters detailing the dosage and timing. A confession from the apothecary, sworn before witnesses. It's all here. Let them see it, the king commanded. Let them read it themselves. Then let them decide who they want to serve. A king who's told them the truth, or a prince who's lied to them about murder. For a moment, the captain looked uncertain. Then he gestured to two of his men. Check the documents. Tell me if they're real. The soldiers approached cautiously and took the papers from Thomas. They read in silence, their expressions growing darker with each page. Finally, one of them looked up at the captain. Sir, these are real. The prince's seal, his handwriting, it's all here. That doesn't mean, it means he poisoned his own father. the soldier burst out. "It's all written down, clear as day. Doses, dates, everything." The courtyard erupted in chaos. Soldiers were shouting, demanding to see the evidence themselves. Some threw down their weapons immediately. Others argued, refusing to believe. The captain stood frozen, his carefully constructed loyalty crumbling as he watched his men turn against each other. Eliza saw her moment. She stepped forward before anyone could stop her, her voice cutting through the noise. "I'm nobody, just a seamstress from Whitechapel. I had no reason to risk my life for the king or the duke or any of you. But when a wounded man knocked on my door and told me the truth, I chose to help him. Not because I owed him anything, not because I expected a reward, but because it was the right thing to do." The shouting died down. Soldiers were staring at her now, this common woman in a borrowed gown, standing between them and their king. "I've spent the last 4 days running for my life," Eliza continued, her voice steady. "Hiding in vegetable carts, sleeping in stables, lying to guards, terrified every moment that we'd be caught and hanged. And you know what I learned? That doing the right thing is almost always the hardest thing. That standing up for truth means risking everything. But it's still worth it. Because if good people don't stand up to murderers and liars, then what's the point of any of this?" She gestured at the palace, the soldiers, the entire edifice of power surrounding them. "You think because the prince was born royal, he deserves the throne? He confessed to murdering his own father? A man like that doesn't deserve your loyalty. He doesn't deserve anything except a traitor's rope." The courtyard was utterly silent now. Even the captain seemed speechless. Adrian moved to stand beside her. "This woman saved my life. She saved the king's life. She's shown more courage in 4 days than most people show in a lifetime. If you want to fight, you'll have to go through her first. And I promise you, she won't go down easy." Several soldiers actually smiled at that. The tension in the air began to shift like a storm changing direction. Then, incredibly, the old guard from inside the palace stepped forward. He looked at his fellow soldiers, Edmund's men, and spoke in a voice rough with emotion. "I've served the crown for 30 years. I've fought in wars, protected kings, done my duty without question, but I won't serve a murderer. I won't die for a man who'd poison his own blood." He dropped to one knee before the king. "Your Majesty, I pledge my sword to you, the real king, not the monster who tried to take your throne." One by one, other soldiers followed, first a handful, then dozens, until more than half of Edmund's forces were kneeling in the courtyard, their weapons laid at their feet. The captain stood alone, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "This is treason. All of you, you're betraying your oaths." "We swore to serve England," one of the kneeling soldiers said quietly. "Not a patricide. The prince will remember this. When he takes the throne, he's not taking anything except a cell in the tower," the king said coldly. "Captain, you have 2 choices. Lay down your weapon and accept the truth, or be arrested alongside the prince as a co-conspirator in my attempted murder." For a long moment, the captain's hand hovered over his sword. Eliza tensed, ready to grab Adrian and pull him out of the line of fire. But then, slowly, the captain's shoulders sagged. He drew his sword and laid it on the ground. "I surrender, Your Majesty." The remaining soldiers followed suit. Within minutes, the entire force had disarmed. Edmund's rebellion had collapsed without a single blow struck. The king let out a breath he'd been holding and nearly collapsed. Thomas caught him, supporting him back toward the palace. "We need to get you to the physicians. The poison can wait a few more minutes." The king looked at Eliza and Adrian. "You two, inside, now. We have matters to discuss." They followed him to a smaller, more private chamber where servants brought wine and food. The king sank into a chair and gestured for them to sit as well. For the first time since the ordeal began, Eliza felt the adrenaline draining from her body, leaving her shaking and exhausted. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen," the king said, looking at her. "Or the most foolish. I'm still not sure which." "Probably both, Your Majesty," Eliza admitted. "Definitely both," Adrian added. He was smiling at her with something that looked like awe. "But it worked. You turned them." "We turned them," Eliza corrected. "All of us together." The king nodded slowly. "Yes, together." He took a sip of wine, studying them both over the rim of his cup. "Duke Blackwell, you asked for permission to marry this woman. I gave it. But I'm curious, does she actually want to marry you? Adrian turned to Eliza, suddenly looking nervous for the first time since she'd met him. That's an excellent question. I may have gotten ahead of myself in the heat of the moment. You declared your love in front of the king, Eliza pointed out. I did do that, yes. You said I was extraordinary. You are. You want me to be your duchess. Very much so. Eliza looked at him. This man who'd stumbled into her life 4 days ago, who'd trusted her with everything, who'd stood beside her through danger and fear and impossible odds. She thought about the girl she'd been before that stormy night, small, invisible, grateful for scraps. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who'd stared down 200 armed soldiers and made them blink first. Ask me properly, she said. Adrian's eyes widened. Then, slowly, he slid from his chair and dropped to one knee before her, in front of the king, in front of Thomas, in front of everyone. Eliza Whitmore, he said, his voice soft but clear. You opened your door to a stranger and changed both our lives. You saved me when you had every reason to turn me away. You've been braver, smarter, and stronger than anyone I've ever known. I don't deserve you, but I'm asking anyway. Will you marry me? Will you be my duchess, my partner, my equal in all things? Eliza felt tears prickling her eyes. Equal. Equal. Always. She reached out and took his hand, pulling him to his feet. Then, yes, I'll marry you. The kiss that followed was nothing like the desperate act in the stable. This was real. This was choice. This was two people who'd found each other in the darkness and decided to step into the light together. When they finally broke apart, the king was smiling, the first genuine smile Eliza had seen from him. Well, he said, at least something good came from this nightmare. He raised his cup. To the Duke and his Duchess. May they be happy. May they be brave. And may they never, ever have to go through anything like this again. I'll drink to that, Thomas said fervently. They stayed up late into the night making plans. The king's physicians were summoned to treat the poison damage. Edmund was moved to a secure cell in the tower, along with the captain who'd led his forces. The soldiers who'd surrendered were questioned, and most were pardoned. They'd been following orders, after all, not knowing the truth. As dawn broke over London, Eliza found herself standing on a palace balcony, looking out over the city. Behind her, she could hear Adrian and Thomas discussing logistics with the king's advisors. But for the moment, she was alone with her thoughts. Can't sleep? She turned to find Adrian joining her at the railing. He looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Too much has happened, Eliza said. 4 days ago, I was sewing dresses in a cramped room, worried about rent. Now I'm in a palace, engaged to a duke, and apparently I'm going to be a duchess. My mind can't quite catch up. Mine either. Adrian moved closer. Are you having second thoughts? About you? No. Eliza smiled. About being a duchess? Absolutely. I don't know the first thing about running an estate or managing servants or whatever it is duchesses do. Neither did I when I inherited the title. You learn as you go. You were born to this world. And you were born to survive in a much harder one. Trust me, you're more prepared than you think. He took her hand. Besides, you won't be doing it alone. We're partners, remember? Equals. Equals, Eliza repeated, testing the word. It still felt strange, impossible, and yet, after everything they'd been through, it also felt right. They stood together in silence, watching the sun paint the sky gold and pink. Below them, London was waking up to a new day. A day where the king still lived, where a murderous prince was in chains, where a seamstress from Whitechapel was about to become a duchess. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. Eliza considered the question. I'm thinking about doors, about the one I opened 4 days ago, about all the ones that have opened since. And I'm glad I opened that first one, even though it was terrifying, even though it could have killed us both. She squeezed his hand. Because it led me here. To you. To this. To being extraordinary, Adrian said softly. To being brave enough to try. The sun rose higher, and London spread out before them like a promise. Behind them, in the palace, The king's advisors were already drafting proclamations. Edmund would be tried for treason. The succession would be secured. England would know the truth about what had almost happened. But in that moment, on that balcony, all that mattered was the two of them, the fugitive duke and the seamstress who'd saved him. Two people who'd found courage in each other and changed their world because of it. "We should go back inside," Eliza said eventually. "People will be looking for us." "Let them look." Adrian pulled her closer. "Just a few more minutes. I want to remember this moment, before everything changes again." "Everything's already changed. True. But this is the good change. The part where we won, where we're safe, where we get to be happy." He kissed her forehead. "I want to hold on to that for as long as I can." So they stayed, watching the sunrise, two people who'd walked through fire and come out the other side stronger than before. Below them, a city full of people who would soon know their story. Above them, a sky full of possibilities. And between them, a love that had been forged in danger and proven in courage. 4 days ago, Eliza Whitmore had been nobody. Today, she was a woman who'd saved a king, stopped a coup, and won a duke's heart. Tomorrow, she'd become a duchess. And she was finally, gloriously, ready. They were called back inside an hour later. The palace had transformed from a battlefield into a hive of activity. Servants rushed through corridors carrying messages. Nobles who'd hidden during the confrontation now emerged, eager to prove their loyalty to the king. And everywhere, whispers followed Eliza and Adrian like shadows. "That's her. The seamstress who saved the king. They say she knocked the prince unconscious with a candlestick. A commoner marrying a duke. Can you imagine?" Eliza could feel their eyes on her. Some curious, some disapproving, all trying to understand how someone like her had ended up here. She lifted her chin and walked beside Adrian as if she belonged, even though her heart was pounding. The king had summoned them to the throne room. When they arrived, they found it packed with members of parliament, nobles, and high-ranking officials. At the center, on his throne, sat the king. He looked stronger today, the color returning to his face as the physicians worked to purge the poison from his system. Beside the throne, in chains, stood Crown Prince Edmund. The prince's face was a mask of cold fury. When his eyes found Eliza, she saw murder in them. She forced herself not to look away. "We are gathered," the king announced, his voice carrying through the vast chamber, "to witness the trial of Crown Prince Edmund for high treason, attempted murder, and conspiracy against the crown." A murmur ran through the assembled nobles. This was unprecedented. A crown prince tried for treason against his own father. The king gestured to Thomas, who stepped forward with the evidence they'd gathered. One by one, the documents were presented. The apothecary's confession, the purchase orders, the letters in Edmund's own hand detailing doses and timing with clinical precision. "The evidence is clear," Thomas declared. "Prince Edmund has admitted in front of witnesses to poisoning His Majesty with the intent to hasten his death and claim the throne." "This is a farce," Edmund snarled. "I was coerced, threatened by a fugitive, and his eyes raked over Eliza with contempt. "His common whore." The insult hung in the air like poison. Eliza felt Adrian tense beside her, his hand moving toward his sword. But before he could act, she stepped forward. "I'm not a whore," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I'm a seamstress. And unlike you, Your Highness, I earned my place here. I didn't inherit it. I didn't scheme for it. I fought for it." "You're nothing," Edmund spat. "A nobody from the gutter who got lucky." "I'm the nobody who stopped you from murdering your father," Eliza interrupted. "I'm the nobody who convinced 200 soldiers to lay down their weapons. I'm the nobody who's about to watch you lose everything you thought you were entitled to." She took another step closer, close enough to see the rage and fear warring in his eyes. "So yes, I'm nothing, but I'm the nothing that beat you." The throne room erupted. Some nobles gasped at her audacity. Others, mostly the younger ones, looked impressed. Edmund lunged forward, chains rattling, but the guards held him back. "Enough!" The king's voice cracked like thunder. "Prince Edmund, you have been found guilty of treason by the evidence of your own hand and the testimony of witnesses. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" For a moment, Edmund seemed to struggle with himself. Then his expression twisted into something ugly and defiant. "I regret nothing," he said. "You were weak. England needed a strong ruler. If that peasant girl hadn't interfered, I would have given this kingdom the leadership it deserved." "You would have given it a tyrant," the king said quietly. "A murderer sitting on the throne, ruling through fear and violence. That's not strength. That's cowardice dressed up in a crown." He rose from his throne, and despite his illness, despite his age, he looked every inch a king. "Edmund Fitzroy, I strip you of your title as crown prince. I remove you from the line of succession, and I sentence you to life imprisonment in the Tower of London, where you will remain until the end of your days, contemplating the price of betrayal." Edmund's face went white. "Father, please. I am not your father anymore. I am your king, and you are nothing but a traitor." He nodded to the guards. "Take him away." They dragged Edmund from the throne room, his protests echoing off the walls until the doors slammed shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the king turned to Eliza and Adrian. "Come forward." They approached the throne together. Eliza was acutely aware of hundreds of eyes on her, judging her, measuring her worth, but she kept her head high. "Duke Blackwell," the king said, "you risked everything to save my life. You brought the truth to light when others would have stayed silent. For that you have my eternal gratitude. Your estates and titles are restored, your name is cleared, and you have my blessing to marry the woman of your choice." Adrian bowed. "Thank you, your majesty." "And you?" The king's gaze moved to Eliza. "Miss Whitmore, you are the most unlikely hero this kingdom has ever known. A seamstress from Whitechapel who showed more courage than most of my nobles combined. You saved my life. You stopped a coup. You proved that worth has nothing to do with birth and everything to do with character." Eliza felt tears prickling her eyes. "I only did what was right, your majesty. That's what makes it extraordinary. Most people know what's right. Very few actually do it when it costs them everything." He smiled. "You will make a remarkable duchess. But more than that, you will make England proud." He gestured, and a servant brought forward a velvet cushion. On it lay a ring, gold set with a single perfect diamond. "This belonged to my grandmother," the king said. "She was born a commoner too, a merchant's daughter who married into royalty and became one of the greatest queens this nation ever knew. I think she would have liked you. I think she would have recognized the same fire in you that made her legendary." Eliza stared at the ring, unable to speak. The king took it from the cushion and placed it in her hand. "Wear it well, Duchess." The throne room exploded into applause. Some of it was polite and obligatory, but Eliza could hear genuine enthusiasm mixed in. People were cheering. For her. A seamstress from Whitechapel. Adrian took her hand, his eyes shining. "Are you all right?" "I have no idea," Eliza whispered. "Is this real?" "Very real." He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Welcome to your new life, Duchess Blackwell." The title still sounded foreign to her ears, but looking at Adrian, at the king, at the people applauding around them, Eliza felt something shift inside her. The girl who'd hidden in shadows was gone. The woman who'd faced down a prince and won had taken her place, and that woman could be a duchess. The following weeks were a whirlwind. The king's physicians worked tirelessly to purge the remaining poison from his system, and slowly he began to recover. Color returned to his cheeks. Strength returned to his limbs. Within a month he was holding court again, handling affairs of state with renewed vigor. Edmund remained locked in the tower, where he would stay for the rest of his life. Some nobles petitioned for mercy, but the king refused. Attempted murder of the sovereign was unforgivable, son or not. The story of the seamstress and the duke spread across England like wildfire. Ballads were written, pamphlets printed. In taverns and market squares, people told and retold the tale, embellishing it, exaggerating it, but always coming back to the core truth. A common woman had saved the king and changed her destiny. Eliza found the attention overwhelming at first. Everywhere she went, people stared. Some bowed, some whispered. A few even asked for her autograph, as if she were some kind of celebrity. "You're famous," Adrian told her one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. "How does it feel?" "Bizarre. A month ago, no one knew my name. Now people are writing songs about me. Bad songs, mostly. I heard one yesterday that rhymed Whitmore with folklore. Absolutely criminal. Eliza laughed despite herself. It's not just the fame, it's everything. Learning to be a duchess, learning court etiquette, remembering which fork to use and how to curtsy to whom. I feel like I'm playing a part I'm not qualified for. Adrian stopped walking and turned to face her. You defeated a crown prince. You stared down 200 armed soldiers. You've survived things that would have broken most people. If you can do all that, you can learn which fork to use. It's not the same. No, it's easier. Because being a duchess is just following rules. Being extraordinary, that's something you already are. Eliza looked at him, this man who'd stumbled into her life and changed it forever. You really believe that, don't you? I know it. I've seen it. He took her hands. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Are you having second thoughts? About marrying you? Never. Eliza squeezed his hands. About deserving this life? Every day. Then let me tell you something. Adrian's voice was serious now. When I was growing up, I was taught that nobility meant bloodlines and inheritance, that some people were born to rule and others to serve. But you've taught me that's nonsense. True nobility is about courage, about doing what's right even when it's terrifying. By that measure, you are more noble than half the aristocrats in this kingdom. Pretty words. True words. He kissed her forehead. You've earned this, Eliza. All of it. Stop apologizing for it. She wanted to believe him, and slowly, day by day, she was learning to. The wedding was held in the palace chapel, attended by nobles and commoners alike. The king himself gave Eliza away, a gesture that sent whispers rippling through the congregation. But he insisted. You saved my life, he'd told her. You're as much family to me as any blood relation, more so than some. Eliza wore a gown of cream silk that made her look like something out of a fairy tale. Her hair was woven with pearls. The queen's ring sparkled on her finger. When she walked down the aisle toward Adrian, she saw his expression transform, wonder and love and something that looked like awe. You're beautiful, he whispered when she reached him. You're biased. Completely, but also correct. The ceremony was traditional but intimate. As they exchanged vows, Eliza thought about the journey that had brought them here. The storm. The knock at her door. The choice she'd made to help a stranger when every practical instinct told her to turn him away. That choice had cost her everything she'd known. Her old life. Her anonymity. Her safety. But it had given her something infinitely more valuable. Purpose. Partnership. Love. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, the chapel erupted in applause. Adrian kissed her thoroughly, and Eliza kissed him back, no longer caring what anyone thought. She was Duchess Eliza Blackwell now, and she'd earned every syllable of that title. The celebration lasted 3 days. Nobles toasted the couple. Commoners threw flowers in the streets when their carriage passed, and everywhere Eliza went, she saw hope in people's eyes. Hope that someone like them could rise. That courage and character mattered more than birth. On the third night, as the festivities were finally winding down, Eliza found herself alone with the king in his private study. He'd requested a moment of her time, and she couldn't refuse. Your Majesty, she said, curtsying. You wanted to see me? I did. The king gestured to a chair. Sit, please. This isn't a formal audience. Eliza sat, trying not to feel intimidated. Even after everything, being alone with the king still made her nervous. I wanted to thank you, he said, properly, without the court and the ceremony and all the politics that come with public gratitude. You've already thanked me, Your Majesty, many times. Not enough. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. You saved my life, Duchess Blackwell. But more than that, you saved England. If Edmund had taken the throne, if his plot had succeeded, this kingdom would have fallen into darkness, wars, tyranny, perhaps even revolution. You prevented all of that. Adrian found the evidence, and you got him here alive to present it. Don't diminish your role in this. Without you, Adrian would have died in an alley somewhere. The evidence would have been lost. Edmund would have won. The king's voice was firm. You are a hero, whether you're comfortable with the title or not." Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. The king studied her for a moment, then continued. "I want you to understand something. The nobles who whispered about you, who questioned your worthiness to marry a duke, they're fools. Birth doesn't make someone worthy. Actions do. And your actions have proven your worth 1,000 times over."
"Some of them still whisper," Eliza admitted. "I heard Lady Pemberton, no relation to my old employer, saying I was getting above my station, that a seamstress had no business in a duchess's gown." "And what did you say to that?" "Nothing. What could I say?" The king smiled.
"You could say that you earned your gown by saving the kingdom while she sat in her manor eating cakes and gossiping. You could say that your station is exactly where you've proven you belong. Or you could simply ignore her, because her opinion means nothing compared to the facts of what you've accomplished." Eliza felt something warm bloom in her chest, confidence maybe, or just the simple comfort of being seen and valued for who she truly was. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Call me Edward, when we're alone at least. You've earned the right. I'm not sure I'll ever be comfortable with that." "Then earn your way into comfort. That seems to be your method." He stood, and Eliza rose with him. "You wanted to know what a duchess does? I'll tell you. A duchess shapes her world. She uses her position to create change. She looks at what's broken and finds ways to fix it." "I'm not sure I know how to do that." "Then learn. The same way you learn to survive. The same way you learn to face down soldiers and princes." Edward's eyes were kind but serious. "You have power now, Duchess Blackwell. Use it. Make it mean something." Those words stayed with Eliza long after the conversation ended. Power. She had power now, not the kind Edmund had craved, born of violence and fear, but the kind that came from position, from respect, from the ability to make decisions that affected people's lives. What would she do with it? The answer came to her one morning as she was going through correspondence at her new estate. Among the requests for patronage and invitations to social events, she found a letter from a young woman in Whitechapel. The handwriting was rough, unpracticed. The paper was cheap, but the words struck Eliza's heart like an arrow. "Dear Duchess Blackwell, I heard you used to be a seamstress like me. I heard you lived in Whitechapel and worked for pennies and thought you'd never be more than that. I heard you opened a door one night and everything changed. I'm writing to ask if you remember what it was like. Being invisible, being nobody, having dreams but no way to reach them. Because that's me now. I'm a seamstress too. I work 16 hours a day and barely make enough to eat, and I wonder if there's any way out or if this is just my life forever. You got out. You found a door. I guess I'm asking, how do I find mine? Respectfully, Sarah Miller." Eliza read the letter 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. She saw herself in every word, the desperation, the hope, the crushing weight of a world that told you that you were nothing and would always be nothing. She knew what she had to do. Over the following months, Eliza threw herself into a project that consumed all her energy and passion. She bought a building in Whitechapel, not far from where she'd lived, and converted it into a school. Not a regular school that taught girls to be quiet and obedient. A school that taught them skills. Reading, writing, mathematics, but also sewing, accounting, business management, everything they'd need to support themselves, to build lives on their own terms. She hired teachers, provided scholarships for girls who couldn't afford tuition, created a system where graduates could find work or even start their own businesses. The nobles thought she was crazy. "Why waste money on common girls?" Lady Pemberton asked at a dinner party. "They'll just end up married or in service anyway." "Maybe," Eliza replied calmly, "or maybe one of them will save a king someday. You never know where extraordinary people come from until you give them a chance to prove it." The school opened on a bright spring morning, 6 months after the wedding. Eliza stood at the entrance, watching as girls filed in, some nervous, some excited, all desperate for the opportunity she was offering. Sarah Miller was among them. Eliza had invited her personally. "Thank you, Your Grace," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for remembering what it was like." "I could never forget," Eliza said. "And call me Eliza. We're all equals here." Adrian found her that evening, standing in the empty schoolroom, running her hand over the desks she'd commissioned. "You did it,"
he said. You built something real. I did, didn't I? Eliza smiled. The nobles think I'm wasting my time and money. The nobles thought you were wasting your time saving the king, too. They've been wrong about you from the start. Not all of them. Some have been kind. More than I expected, actually. Because they're seeing what I saw the night I knocked on your door, that you're remarkable, that you belong in their world, or rather, that their world is lucky to have you in it. Eliza turned to face him fully. Do you ever regret it? Everything that happened, the danger, the running, the fact that you're married to a woman the court whispers about? Every single day, Adrian said seriously. Then he grinned. I regret that it took me 29 years to find you. Everything else wouldn't change a moment. You're ridiculous. I'm in love, same thing. They stood together in the schoolroom, two people who'd found each other in a storm and built a life from courage and hope. Outside, London was changing. The king's health had been restored. Edmund rotted in the tower, a cautionary tale about ambition unchecked by conscience. And in Whitechapel, girls who'd been told they were nothing were learning that they could be anything, all because one seamstress had chosen to open a door. Years passed. The school thrived, expanding to other cities. Graduates went on to open businesses, to teach, to break barriers that had seemed unbreakable.
Sarah Miller became one of the finest seamstresses in London, eventually opening her own shop and employing other girls from the program. Eliza's work drew attention from beyond England's borders. Other countries wrote asking how they could replicate her model, how they could give their own forgotten girls a chance at better lives. She traveled, speaking to assemblies and councils, always with Adrian at her side. Together, they became symbols of something new, a partnership built on equality, a noble couple who actually worked to improve the world rather than just rule it. The king remained healthy, ruling wisely for another 15 years before passing peacefully in his sleep. In his will, he left a substantial endowment to Eliza's schools, ensuring they'd continue long after he was gone. Edmund died in the tower, bitter and alone, having never recanted his crimes or expressed remorse. Few attended his burial. On the 20th anniversary of the night she'd opened her door, Eliza stood in the original Whitechapel school, now expanded to fill an entire city block. Hundreds of students studied there now, learning skills that would let them write their own futures. You know what's funny? She said to Adrian as they watched a group of girls practice their letters. I used to dream of being noticed, of mattering, of being someone people remembered. And now you are. Your name is known across Europe. You've changed thousands of lives. You're exactly what you dreamed of. No. Eliza shook her head. I'm more than that, because the girl who had those dreams just wanted to be seen. She wanted to matter to someone, anyone. But now? She gestured at the school, at the girls bent over their work, at the future being built one lesson at a time. Now I've helped others be seen. I've shown them they matter, and that feels bigger than any dream I ever had. Adrian pulled her close. The seamstress who saved the king. The woman who opened a door, Eliza corrected, and found out what was possible on the other side. That night, as they prepared for bed in their London townhouse, Eliza caught sight of herself in the mirror. 20 years had passed since that stormy night. She was older now, tiny lines around her eyes, but there was a confidence in her bearing that the younger version of herself had never possessed. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. That I'm grateful. For what? For the storm. For the knock at my door. For every terrifying moment that led me here. She turned to face him. For you. I'm the one who should be grateful. You saved my life. And you gave me one worth living. Eliza smiled. I'd say we're even. They stood together at the window, looking out over London, the city where a seamstress had once been invisible, where a duchess now left her mark on history. And whenever people asked Eliza how she'd done it, how she'd risen from nothing to nobility, from obscurity to influence, she always gave the same answer. It all began with a storm, and a door I chose to open. Because in the end, that's what courage was. Not the absence of fear, not the guarantee of safety, just the willingness to open a door, even when you didn't know what waited on the other side. Sometimes what waited was danger. Sometimes it was heartbreak. Sometimes it was death. But sometimes, if you were brave enough, if you were willing to risk everything, what waited was love, purpose, a chance to change your world and everyone in it. Eliza had opened her door, and it had changed everything.